Hi everyone, this is Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes. Welcome to my channel, where you will find photo editing training and educational videos to help you grow as an artist and photographer. If this image looks familiar to you, you are right, because we've been working on this image in one of the previous videos where we were talking about contrast. Tim requested a follow-up video on color contrast, so today we will take this photo that we've been working on previously and we will focus on adding color contrast. So this is our starting point and we will be working towards this result. Let's get started. Okay, before we jump into Capture One and before we start manipulating with colors, let's take a quick look at Adobe Color Wheel and let's explain how do we create color contrast in an image. So if you are not familiar with this tool, I would recommend it to anyone. This tool is free and it's very, very helpful. I'm going to show you how you can import your image inside this tool and how you can analyze. So now we are just looking at a color wheel. The colors are random. So here you can select different color harmonies. Now we have selected analog, use monochromatic, triad, complementary, and so on and so forth. So what is color contrast in an image? How do you create color contrast? So basically the color harmony, the simplest color harmony that represents strong contrast in an image is complementary color harmony. So as you can see here, colors that create strong contrast are colors that lie on the opposite sides of the color wheel. So in this case, randomly, Adobe Color Wheel just displayed the most common complementary color scheme, and we have the blues on one side of the color wheel, and on the other side of the spectrum we have yellows. So this color harmony is very often used in the cinema. It's so-called cinematic color grading. But the contrast, the color contrast, of course, doesn't apply only between the blues and the yellows. You can turn around these colors and you can experiment further, so you can create color contrast between magentas and greens. You can do the same between cyans and oranges. So that's basically how you can analyze your image and how you can explore the possibilities. So let's jump back to Capture One and I'm going to take a screenshot of the original photo. This will be our starting point. So I'm just going to very quickly take a screen grab and jump back to my Adobe Color Wheel. And here, let's move over to the second option available here, extract theme. So here you have this button, select a file, and from here I'm just going to take the screenshot that I have just captured. So here we are. That way Adobe Color Tool analyzes the image that we have just imported and it picks the 5 most prominent colors in our image. It believes that these are the 5 most important colors, and I think that this representation is quite close. So we can manually manipulate with those control points, but I think that they represent the colors quite well. So maybe we can pick one of these brighter tones. So I think we can take it as a base. So now we can move to the color wheel and you can see that these very colors are now mapped on the color wheel, so we can analyze their positioning. So if you remember, we were talking about the complementary color harmony, and to create a color contrast, we need to have colors that are positioned on the opposite sides of the color wheel, across the color wheel. So if we analyze the samples that were just created by Adobe Color Tool, These colors are positioned quite near one to each other on the color wheel, so we don't have any strong color contrast in our image. So if we jump back to the image, we can see that it is quite harmonious, however, it is lacking color contrast. It has plenty of luma contrast. We have a lot of dark tones, we have mid-tones, we have quite strong highlights. The image is very dynamic, the composition is very dynamic, but in terms of color, if you just take a look at the color samples here, it is harmonious, but we can't say that it has strong color contrast. So now we can try to think which colors we can push into which part of color wheel to create color contrast. So I would stay with these gray and sort of cold bluish tones where they are, and I would try to manipulate, I would try to push those brownish tones, those warmer tones, towards the yellow. So this is how I can plan my color grading game. So I've made this tone brighter since it was very dark and it was hard to get any color. So of course I'm not going to achieve such a strong and saturated colors, but taking the analysis of the image that I have just imported into Adobe Color Tool, I can see what can be done in order to contrast the existing colors in the image stronger. Okay, so let's jump back to Capture One and let's start working on our image in terms of adding color contrast. So this is the starting point. I have already created new clone variant of this image where I have deleted all the layers that are not needed, because we will be adding more layers when working on color, and there is a limit to the amount of layers that you can have in Capture One. I believe the maximum amount of layers is 16. So let's start working on color. I'm going to add new field adjustment layer, and we will be working with color editor. So let's just pull our tool out. Let's hide the browser. So here we are, and let's jump right into skin tone. We are not working on a portrait, so you might be surprised why I'm going to use the skin tone tab. So the name can be quite confusing because it suggests that you will use this tool for portraits, for working with skin tones, but don't forget that its purpose is to even out colors. So whenever you are working on a portrait, you would use skin tone, you would use this tab to even out the color of the skin. So for example, when you have a portrait and the hands are visible, or there are some color patches, some color shifts, this is perfect to even out colors. And today I'm going to show you that you can use the skin tone tab inside the color editor in landscape photography to create very beautiful balanced color grading effect. So just a few words why I'm not going to use the advanced tab. So in case of this tab, you will have the freedom of working just inside this one tab, and on the very one layer that we have created here, you could sample different colors and you could be shifting those colors, you could be adjusting these colors. However, the image is very dramatic, it is very dynamic, we have plenty of luma contrast, we have very strong shadows, we have strong highlights, we have very dynamic lines going on here. And basically, I believe that this image will benefit from harmonizing the colors. We don't want to have more colors added, and I feel that it will look way better when we reduce the amount of colors and when we push them towards basically two main groups. And that's what I've done in the final image. So let me just quickly jump back to the browser and then let's take a look at the image that I've been working on. So this is the result that we will be working towards. So basically it would be very hard to achieve this result with the advanced color editor. So as you can see here, I have simplified the color palette. So if we take a look at the original image, so here we have plenty of grays, but we have, let's just quickly zoom in, we have some of those warm greens, where you have those little trees, we have those brown colors here. You can analyze the color by looking at the color readouts. So here we have this very strong color accent where we have the road. So there is a lot of going on. And if I would be just shifting those colors individually, we will be creating more colors, and this will basically add more chaos to this image. So if you compare this image with the one that I have been working on, you can see that I have simplified the color palette, that I went towards blues versus yellows. So I have warmed up that rock, I have added more yellow to the rock, I have shifted those oranges that are visible here in the road, and I have pushed them towards the yellow. So basically my aim was to create stronger color contrast by sticking to the blue tones that were already present in the image, or maybe I have shifted those grayish tones towards stronger blues, and on the other hand we have yellows that create the color contrast, so then I shifted those sort of orangey pinky tones towards the yellows. So first of all, simplifying the color palette and then shifting colors, and this can be done with the skin tone tab. So let's go back to the image that we will be working on, and let's start sampling our colors. I'm going to hide the browser, so let's move back to skin tone. Let's maybe position it here, that way it will be clearer, our working space. So I'm going to be naming layers by the names of colors that I will be sampling. So I'm going to firstly take the picker and sample somewhere around here. First I'm going to add the blues, and then I will be working on the browns to add more warm tones to the image. So I'm going to sample, let's say, somewhere around those rocks. So this is the color that was sampled, and I'm going to rename this layer and call it blue 1, because you can sample only one color when you are working with skin tone, and that's why we will have to add more layers, but believe me, it's worth it. So let's click on this icon. This will include the whole saturation range within the color sample. If you want to see what is selected, you can click this little button here, and that way everything that is grayed out is not selected, and the areas that contain the color that we have picked are visible here. So we can see a lot of blue here in the shadows, in the midtones, and here on the sky and on those hills visible far behind. So let's just switch off the preview and let's start manipulating with the color. So first we will be working with amount, and this will allow us to go closer towards the color that we are after. So by manipulating with the hue, we will be pushing this little circle here, this little point here near to the center of the color wheel, represents the sample that we have just taken inside the image. So if I would push the hue slider towards the right hand side, let's go for stronger saturation, so we will see what is going on here. We can see that by pushing the hue slider towards the right, I'm adding more magenta. So this is the opposite direction that I want to go for. If I go for the other way, I will be pushing my point towards here upwards inside the color wheel and adding colder tones, going more towards the blue. And this is what I'm after. This is what I want to achieve. So let's reduce saturation, and when it comes to lightness, I'm going to maybe make it a little bit brighter, but actually not at this point, not yet. So now we have adjusted the color and we can jump to the second part, uniformity. So this is what I meant when I was talking about simplifying color palette. So basically what this will do for your image is that if you have tones within this scale, starting from cyans and going all the way through the blues towards those colors on the border between the blue and magenta, if you will push hue slider towards the right, this will unify the hue. So basically all those hues scattered within this selection will be pushed towards one common hue. So this is super helpful when you are working on complex images and when you want to get rid of unwanted color shifts and when you want to unify hue, when you want to unify a color inside the image. So this is working on uniformity when it comes to the hue, and you can as well touch saturation slider, so this will push sort of all the hues inside this selection towards similar level of saturation. Let's take a quick look before and after. So before, those tones are way less saturated. Let's focus here. So before the sky, those hills are super grayish, not much blue is over there. And if we switch it on, you can see that we have a bit more blue. So this is the first layer of working on blue. Let's make another step. So don't make a mistake, don't sample again on the very same layer. We have to create new field adjustment layer, and let's just rename it. Let's call it blue number 2. And here we are going to use the same tool, skin tone, our color picker. So let's sample again in the rock. Let's include the whole saturation range and let's manipulate with the color further. So let's go for strong saturation so we see the effect. So this is adding magenta, this is adding blue, and this is what we want. So we can go for -5 for the hue. When it comes for saturation, let's go a bit down. Lightness, I'm going to maybe increase a notch. Let's now jump to uniformity. When it comes to hue, I'm going to go all the way, maybe around 94. And saturation, I'm going to go for a strong value as well. So now if I switch these two layers, you can see the shift that we have created. So this is after manipulating with the blues, and this is before. So we can slightly increase saturation here, we can increase lightness, and we can fine-tune these values. So I'm going to jump back to the first layer, blue 1, and actually go here for -5. So let's now focus on the other color. So if we quickly jump back to our Adobe Color Wheel, we've been working on those blues. Let's now focus on adding yellows, on shifting colors in our image towards yellows. So if I hover over the image around here and take a look at the color readouts, we can see that we have plenty of red, 120, 95 for the green, and 91 for the blue. So we will be adding more yellow, we will be going more towards orangey look here. So don't forget to add new field adjustment layer. I'm going to change the size of my layers tab, so more layers will be visible, new field adjustment layer, and I'm just going to rename it to brown 1. Skin tone tab, color picker, and let's pick our color somewhere here. Let's click on this icon to make the whole range of saturation included. I'm going to pull this tool out, so we'll see the samples here underneath. Let's position it around here. So I'm just going to check first. If I push the hue slider towards the right, let's go for maximum saturation. So that way the color gets super strong, but we see what direction we are going for. So if we go the other way, this is adding more magenta. So we are going downwards inside the color wheel. If I go this way, I'm adding yellow, and this is what I'm after. So let's reduce saturation. Let's maybe increase a little bit, and let's increase lightness. And let's now jump to the uniformity, and let's go for stronger uniformity for the hue and stronger uniformity value for saturation. Let's take a quick before and after on the brown. So this is before adjusting the color, and this is after. So if I zoom in, you can see that I managed already to get rid of those greenish tones inside those areas where we have the tree present. So again, this is before. We have way more tones here. The colors were scattered, and if I switch this on, this unifies my tones. Let's now add another field adjustment layer, and let's rename it. Let's call it brown 2, and here let's sample again skin tone tab. Let's sample again somewhere here, and let's go for the right hand side. So I'm adding yellow, and let's reduce saturation, and let's increase brightness, something around here, and let's now jump to the uniformity. So I'm going to go quite strongly on those values, and this simplifies the color palette. You can see that before we had plenty of different colors. We had some purples, we have some grays, we had some oranges, and now basically the image gets divided into the blue part here, where we have the sky and the rock, and the right bottom corner is including warmer tones closer to the yellow. I want to go for a color closer to the yellow, so I'm going to add new field adjustment layer and rename it. Let's call it brown 3, and here again skin tone picker, and let's sample again somewhere around here. Let's go for hue towards the right hand side. Let's increase a bit saturation, and let's increase brightness. So we can fine tune later on with color balance. However, you can see already at this point that with lightness you can make those colors stronger. The brighter the color is, the more strongly it will appeal to the viewer. So let's now go for uniformity, and I'm going to go quite strongly as well on the hue, and quite strongly as well on saturation. Okay, let's hide our color editor tool, and when I look at the blue color, I'm not quite happy with this hue yet. I would like it to be more on the cyanish side, so let's revisit our blue layers, and let's open the color editor again. So here we have hue -5, but okay, let's create another layer, and I'm going to sample around here. So let's create new field layer. I'm going to rename it and call it blue 3. And let's drag it down so things will be tidy and organized. So let's now jump over to color editor, and here let's sample maybe here around those hills. Let's include whole saturation range, and now let's manipulate with the color. So if I go towards the right, you can see very clearly that I'm warming up the tone. I'm adding magenta, but if I go the other way, I'm adding more cyan to the blue, and this is what I want. This is what I'm after. So again, if I go towards the right, this actually creates quite nice and harmonious effect, but we are working on color contrast in this video, and I want to go for color contrast. So I'm going to go for -5 when it comes to saturation. I believe this is way too much. I can always fine tune it later, so something maybe around 14. We want to create a balanced effect, so if we take a look at the image as a whole, we can see this strong element here, this strong accent, and I want to introduce something strong here as well to a bit balance out this road. So let's maybe keep saturation as it is, and let's go maybe for stronger lightness. Let's experiment. So this is the maximum, and this is if I would go for lower value. No, we have the aerial perspective here. These hills are very, very far away from the place where I was standing, so it won't be looking natural if I would be darkening it out, and this will be actually flattening the image. So we have the aerial perspective here, and those places that are far away from you will be always brightened. So I will increase lightness a notch. So in terms of working with color editor, we can leave it for now. And now I'm going to show you one more step. We will jump over to color balance, and this will allow you to harmonize things further in terms of color and in terms of luminosity, because not many of you are using color balance to further fine-tune luminosity in your images. So let's create new field adjustment layer, and let's just rename it to color balance. So in terms of the master tab in color balance, here we would introduce a color cast over the image, but I don't want to do this. I'm super happy with the color contrast that I have created. So we have this yellowish brownish rock in the first plan, and we have those cold bluish tones in the rocks far behind in the background. So by adding something in the master channel, we would be unifying these colors, and this is not what is needed here. So let's jump over to the shadow tab, and here we will inject a bit of cold tones inside the shadow. So I'm going to just add a bit of blue inside the shadows. So you can see that this very, very subtle operation added more depth to the image, and especially in the foreground, because it created another layer of color contrast here inside the rock. So let's zoom in, and let me quickly switch off the color balance layer. So this is before, where the shadows, let's just take a color readouts, they were already cool. We have 23 for the blue, 18 for green, and 6 for the red. But if I switch on and if I check now, we have 27 for the blue, 14 for the green, and 1 for the red. So we can make the shadows even colder. We can introduce more color. However, I want to maintain the realistic view, so let's not overdo this. Let's jump over to the mid-tone tab. So let's see what works here. If we go for cool tones, this very beautifully increases the effect of aerial perspective. We have the middle plan getting cooler and more distant, but the road is very beautifully contrasting. And we have those rocks that were lit here, that they are warm and yellowish. Let's see if we go for warm tone. So this is quite pleasing, but I would go for the blue tone. Right now the image gets too warm to my liking, and we are losing those blues because this part is sitting definitely in the mid-tone. So if you take a look at the histogram in the graph here, if I hover over the sky, you can see the vertical orange line moving inside the histogram. So that way you can judge what luminosity range you are targeting. So you can see that this line is sitting perfectly in the middle of the histogram, so this means that we are working with midtones. But if you would be just judging by looking at the image, you would say that, okay, I'm in the highlights because this part is definitely bright in comparison with the rest elements, with the rest of the content of the image. But histogram will always tell you the truth, so we are working on midtones, and by warming up midtones with color balance, we are losing our blues that we were working that hard here in the layers tab with the color editor. So let's get back to the initial plan, to the initial idea, and let's add a little bit of cool tone inside the midtones. And here I would like to as well brighten the midtones. So Very often we are using the color balance tool to inject specific color inside our selected luminosity range, but this tool is super helpful as well if you want to fine-tune luminosity range. So if you use the slider positioned here to the right, you can either brighten your midtones or darken. So if I go down, I will be darkening the midtones. I'm flattening the image as well. So I will definitely go in the opposite direction and introducing more light, more spaciousness inside the picture. So let's now jump over to the highlight. And here I will definitely want to warm up the highlights, so I will add something between yellow and orange, something maybe cooler. So remember, we are working on color contrast. I believe something like this will be sufficient. So if we just zoom in and take a look at the road, so okay, this works really well, and I would like to brighten the highlights as well. So in particular, I want to make those areas that were lit and have those nice warm tones, those on the rocks and here near the road, I want to brighten it. So let's push the slider upwards so that we are making our highlights brighter. So that way, by working with color balance and with the color editor, we've been shifting colors in our image. Let's jump back to our starting point. So now if we look one beside the other, you can see that with those few steps we've been going towards quite a big difference in terms of color. So you can see now when these images are placed one beside the other, how we have shifted those colors. So here we have those grayish tones. Remember, always take a look at the color readouts because eyes get very quickly deceived and you can just get used to looking at certain colors, and it's very hard to say if the color is neutral gray or if it's something warmer or colder. A very good idea is to take short breaks when you are color grading your images. But here, when we have finished working on color, you can see the difference, you can see the result. So the rock here, something completely different. Here it's blue, here it's more on the magentish side, way warmer. And if we take a look at those rocks here, these are quite similar, but because we didn't have the blue tones, everything was way flatter here. It was harmonious, but we didn't have the color contrast. So now here, by introducing the blues, by strengthening the yellows, by getting rid of the pinkish orangey tones, we have simplified the color palette and we definitely achieved more color contrast in the image. So let's zoom in again and pan around. If you're getting value from my videos, I would be super happy if you like the video and if you subscribe to my channel. If you just hit the little bell, you will make sure that you won't miss any of my future videos. And I would like to encourage you to request videos. If you have any specific questions, if you would like me to go in depth on some subject that might be difficult for you, please in the comment area request a video, and if I find that your request is interesting and might bring something interesting to the viewers, I will definitely analyze the subject and I will record a video on it. At this point, I would like to mention a few words in general about color grading. Color grading is a super personal and super subjective process. There is no right or wrong color grading. So today we've been working on adding color contrast to the image, on creating color contrast, and that's why I have specifically shifted those colors to achieve the complementary color harmony and to go for the blues versus the yellows. However, this is my idea for the color grading for today. If I would be color grading this image tomorrow, I might create something entirely different, and that's why I'm saying that this process is entirely subjective. So some of you might prefer the original version of the image, which I like quite a lot as well. So you might fine-tune these colors, you might go for maybe stronger highlights here, introduce more of this orangey color that is visible in the road to harmonize the image. So basically you might take the same image and create at least 5-10 different color representations of the image. So here, when we've been working with the color balance tool, we've been working with luminosity as well. We've been adjusting luminosity. We've been making the highlights and midtones brighter. So just with this very tool, you might make the midtones darker, and this would create different effect as well, because as I've mentioned before, the brighter the color is, the stronger it will appear, the stronger it will affect the viewer's eye. It will always pull the attention towards itself. The stronger, the more saturated the color is. So by subduing the color but making it less saturated, or by making it darker, you will change the color contrast across the whole image. The whole concept of color grading is quite complex, but it's a very beautiful subject, and it gives plenty of room to experiment. It gives plenty of flexibility. And as always, the beginnings are quite hard, because working with color is not an easy subject, but once you get a grip, you will be working faster, and it's really very, very satisfying to color grade your images and to create different color versions of one image. If you would like to learn more about Capture One, if you want to take a really deep dive into the subject, I would encourage you to check out my comprehensive course on Capture One. I have covered everything that you need to know, even if you are just starting out with Capture One. So here you have the link in the upper right corner. The link will be as well available in the description. You can check the course curriculum and you can take the free preview of the course. So today we've been focusing on color contrast. This was Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to leave me your suggestions for next videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.